finally getting his turn with the Tuneup Treatment with the rerun of the Cyber Kitty Kuro-Chan collaboration for 2023. It is CKC00 Black Kid, REGRADED, with the kit of Desperate, Giga Gatling, Hyper Missile, biped legs, and the leg ability of Trigger Happy, which buffs all leg stats minus armor and heavy limit for every critical hit scored by a shooting skill. Now, as the first model of when the collaboration first came around, Black Kid brought a couple new skills to the game, or at least in different variances, that made him interesting to use and a lot more utility and with good synergy with his kit. Desperate is a support-based skill that, once active, will boost the base damage of the user by a certain amount, at the cost that upon attacking the target, the user will take recoil damage up to about 50% of whatever was dealt, making this more of a fight-or-flight, last-ditch attempt type of skill more than anything else. Giga Gatling is a shooting-based skill that is a scattered AoE with 2 damage bonus conditions to it. The first of which is it has passive defense ignore, much like, say, Pile Wood for conventional melee, but on top of that, it also has a times 1.5 damage bonus as long as the user's legs remain intact. And while with it being a scattered AoE, it will damage one part normally and then 2 others at random at 1/3 of your damage. It also is worth noting with Gatling or scattered AoE type skills that they do also have a naturally high base success, which means they also have a naturally high likelihood of landing hits normally, as well as a higher likelihood of landing critical hits on top of that, which ties very nicely into his leg ability. Hyper Missile on the left arm is a gunpowder-based skill that, instead of it being an AoE like regular missile, or a scattered AoE like napalm, is instead a pierce damage type of skill. So honestly, this was made very evident with, say, Hardness 10 or God Emperor, who also has this skill, but compared to napalm or missile, this one is definitely much more versatile in the sense that you're more likely to deal pierce damage and break something than you would dealing AoE or scattered AoE damage doing the same. Biped legs means that he will have moderately good coverage across most terrains, again, biped being one of the best all-round, and the Trigger Happy ability honestly does tie his kit together moderately well, because Giga Gatling does have a high base success, like I mentioned, to tie into this. So even if his stats may not be super great at first glance, a couple crits into the game and he's definitely going to be keeping up with the big dogs no matter what. When it comes to his upgrades, he definitely take what he already had and made it more aggressive than it was before. Not that he was already kind of aggressive to a point to begin with. His head has access to plus 100 to heat, plus 50 to cool, and his skill of Desperate gets a reduction in the recoil penalty that he takes while the skill is activated, even if it's only for 1 turn. That easily goes without saying that recoil penalty reduction is going to be a huge plus and bonus to anyone that will be using Black Kid in this case, because that recoil can also break parts if you're not careful. So even though it will boost your damage, it does mean the recoil may potentially hurt you more than it will help you. Between heat and cool, I would personally recommend going for heat because that plus 100 will be much more noticeable than plus 50 to cool, but that honestly kind of lies down to where you want it personally and based on personal preference. Right arm of Giga Gatling has access to plus 200 to armor, plus 100 to success, and 100 to power. Now again, because Gatling attacks tend to focus on having a higher base success, the success and the power are both the 2 big go-to upgrades that you want to shoot for, with more of an emphasis on success, because the more likely you are to land crits, the more likely it is his leg ability can activate and trigger more times than normal. Left arm of Hyper Missile has access to plus 500 to armor, plus 100 to heat, and a damage plus that deals an additional 50% bonus damage when triggering pierce damage. Now compared to, say, basic rifle or sword, which only get a 30% bonus of the same damage plus condition, Hyper Missile is definitely more aggressive and will be dealing much more punish damage if you can trigger it. And Hyper Missile also is very good when it comes to breaking parts more than once, because it has such a high base power. So that damage plus is definitely a big bonus you want to shoot for first, and behind that you could go heat, you could go armor. That honestly would kind of break down to personal preference and discretion once you have him to that point. His legs have access to plus 500 to armor, plus 100 to evade, plus 50 to mobility, Trigger Happy grants an additional 10% once the effect is triggered, and of course S rank on prairie terrains. Now the Trigger Happy ability, again, absolutely goes without saying. The more bonuses you can get when triggering crits, the higher his leg stats go and the more of a threat he becomes and the harder he is to be taken down. So that is easily the first upgrade you want to shoot for first. After that, you could go for armor, and personally I would go for that first, just on the grounds that the tankier he can get, the better and the longer he can stick around. In comparison to evade, which the plus 100 is nice, the evade is still kind of an up in the air stat when it comes to dodging or grazing. Terrain honestly is nice, but again, that extra 10% on prairie you'd get really won't make or break you too much, since biped legs already have A rank on it already. Now originally I had Black Kid marked as a solid 8 across the board for both his pure set and his mixed parts scores, because he had very good synergy as kind of that all-round aggressive shooter type between Giga Gatling, Hyper Missile, and Desperate to boost the power. But taking his upgrades into effect that buff his base power or his crit chance, I would have to bump him up to a flat 8.5 across the board, because he still has that very nice all-rounded nature of a shooter type with the aggressive kind of behavior you'd expect of a nuker. So he can make himself very useful on the field both as mixed parts and as a pure set, and they have very good synergy with his leg ability, which in turn will comp back and make him more of a threat the longer he's allowed to stay alive.